The sharp click of heels against the marble floor echoed through the empty corridor, each step resonating with purpose and decades of experience. Sarah adjusted her tailored blazer as she approached the conference room, where a pivotal meeting awaited, one that could secure a $7.4 million contract for the company. She had spent weeks preparing, poring over spreadsheets, crafting presentations, and strategizing every detail to perfection. At 58, she was still at the top of her game, but lately, there had been whispers in the office about fresh blood and new energy. It made her uneasy, though she tried not to let it show. As she entered the break room just moments before the meeting, she found herself alone with Greg, her boss, a man half her age who had risen quickly through corporate ranks on charm more than competence. He stood by the coffee machine, his back turned to her as he poured 2 steaming cups. Something about the way he moved seemed off, deliberate yet furtive. Her instincts prickled, but she dismissed it as paranoia. After all, this wasn't the first time they'd shared coffee before a big presentation. "Morning," she said lightly, stepping closer. "Ready for today?" Greg glanced over his shoulder, offering a tight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Always," he replied smoothly, sliding 1 cup toward her. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted up, rich and inviting. She hesitated for only a second before picking it up, taking a sip as she grabbed some creamer from the fridge. It tasted fine, strong, bitter, familiar. But within minutes, an odd sensation began creeping into her stomach, subtle at first, like a distant rumble. By the time she reached the conference room, her hands trembled slightly around the folder she carried. The other team members were already seated, their faces a mix of anticipation and nerves. Sarah took her place at the head of the table, forcing a calm she didn't feel. Greg sat across from her, leaning back casually in his chair, watching her with an intensity that unnerved her. Then it hit, hard. A wave of nausea rolled through her body, sudden and violent. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white, as cold sweat broke out on her forehead. Her vision blurred momentarily, and she fought to steady her breathing. Across the table, Greg's expression remained unreadable, almost detached, as if he were observing an experiment rather than witnessing a colleague's distress. "Sarah?" one of the junior associates asked, concern lacing her voice. "Are you okay?" She forced a weak smile, nodding even as another surge of dizziness threatened to overwhelm her. "I'm fine," she lied, clutching her pen like a lifeline. "Just need a moment." But moments were slipping away. The client was due to arrive any second, and Sarah knew she couldn't afford to appear anything less than composed. This meeting was too important, not just for the company, but for her career. For years, she'd been the backbone of this team, mentoring younger employees, closing deals no one else could, proving that age brought wisdom and resilience. Yet now, sitting here doubled over in pain, she wondered if those contributions meant anything at all. Her thoughts raced, fragmented and frantic. Was this stress? Exhaustion? Or something else entirely? Her gaze flickered toward Greg, who was scrolling casually through his phone, seemingly unfazed by her obvious discomfort. That small, nagging suspicion from earlier returned, stronger this time. Had he done something to her coffee? No, that was absurd. Why would he sabotage her right before such a critical meeting? And yet, why did his behavior feel so calculated? Why did he seem so unruffled while she struggled to keep herself together? The door opened, snapping her attention back to the present. The client walked in, flanked by 2 assistants, their polished demeanor radiating confidence. Sarah swallowed hard, pushing aside her growing unease. She had worked too long and too hard to let this opportunity slip away. Whatever was happening to her body, she would fight through it. She had to. Forcing herself upright, she plastered on a professional smile and extended her hand. "Good morning. Thank you for joining us today." Her voice sounded steady enough, though inside, she felt anything but. As the meeting began, Sarah focused every ounce of energy on maintaining control, even as waves of sickness crashed over her like stormy seas. Each word she spoke felt heavier than the last, each gesture requiring monumental effort. And all the while, Greg watched silently, his presence looming larger with each passing minute. Hours later, or maybe it was only minutes, time had become a blur. Sarah found herself slumped in her office chair, staring blankly at the wall. The meeting had gone poorly, though not disastrously. She'd managed to get through it barely, but the sharpness she prided herself on was missing. Her arguments lacked their usual precision, her delivery faltered under the weight of her deteriorating condition. Even the client noticed, asking once or twice if she was feeling all right. Now, alone in the quiet aftermath, the reality of what had happened sank in. Something was very wrong, and Greg was at the center of it. She replayed the scene in her mind, the break room, the coffee, his peculiar behavior. Everything pointed to him, yet nothing concrete tied him to any wrongdoing. How could she prove it? More importantly, why would he do such a thing? Her phone buzzed on the desk, jolting her out of her thoughts. It was a text from HR, requesting a meeting first thing tomorrow morning. The message was brief, formal, but its timing felt suspicious. Coincidence? Or part of whatever plan Greg was orchestrating? Sarah leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes as exhaustion washed over her. Tomorrow would be another battle, one she wasn't sure she had the strength to face. But giving up wasn't an option. Not yet. Not when everything she'd built hung precariously in the balance. The next morning arrived too soon, sunlight streaming through her office window as she prepared for the HR meeting. Dressed in her sharpest suit, armed with documents detailing her contributions to the company, Sarah rehearsed what she would say. She needed to defend herself, to expose whatever scheme Greg was weaving. But deep down, doubt gnawed at her resolve. What if they didn't believe her? What if Greg's influence ran deeper than she realized? As she stepped into the HR office, her heart pounded in her chest. The room was small, sterile, dominated by a large wooden desk behind which sat Linda, the HR manager, and Greg himself. His presence confirmed her worst fears. This wasn't going to be a simple discussion, it was a setup. "Please have a seat," Linda said, gesturing to the chair opposite them. Her tone was polite, but there was an edge to it, a hint of something Sarah couldn't quite place. She sat down cautiously, placing her folder on the desk. "What's this about?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the knot tightening in her stomach. Linda exchanged a glance with Greg before speaking. "We've received some concerns regarding your recent performance, particularly during yesterday's meeting with the client. There are also questions about your ability to continue handling high-pressure situations effectively." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. So this was how they planned to take her down, not outright accusations, but insinuations, planting seeds of doubt about her competence. She clenched her fists beneath the table, fighting to maintain her composure. "That meeting was sabotaged," she said firmly, leveling her gaze at Greg. "Someone tampered with my coffee before we went in. I know it sounds far-fetched, but I can't ignore the timing or the symptoms I experienced." Greg raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "That's quite an accusation, Sarah. Do you have any evidence to support it?" Her jaw tightened. Of course, he would demand proof she didn't have. Without witnesses or tangible evidence, her claim would sound like desperation. Still, she refused to back down. "I don't," she admitted, "but I'm willing to undergo any tests necessary to prove my point. If someone poisoned me, there will be traces left in my system." Linda scribbled something on her notepad, her expression unreadable. "We'll look into that possibility," she said diplomatically, though her tone suggested skepticism. "In the meantime, given your current state and these concerns, we may need to reconsider your role in upcoming projects." Sarah's stomach dropped. They were sidelining her, stripping away her responsibilities piece by piece. It was a slow, calculated dismantling of her career, designed to push her toward early retirement without ever firing her outright. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and frustration. "I've dedicated decades of my life to this company. You're throwing that away based on baseless accusations." Greg leaned forward, his expression softening into false sympathy. "No one's denying your contributions, Sarah. But times change. The industry evolves. Maybe it's time to pass the torch to someone younger, someone who can bring fresh ideas to the table." His words struck a nerve, not because they were true, but because they revealed his true motive. This wasn't about performance or capability, it was about age. About replacing her with someone cheaper, easier to control, more malleable. Someone like him. Sarah stood abruptly, gathering her folder. "If that's how you see things, then I'll make this easy for you," she said, her voice icy with determination. "I'll request a full medical evaluation and review of my work history. If you think you can force me out without consequences, you're gravely mistaken." With that, she turned and strode out of the office, leaving behind stunned silence. Outside, the hallway stretched endlessly before her, a metaphor for the uncertain road ahead. She knew the fight wouldn't be easy, but she also knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't go down without a fight. Over the following days, Sarah threw herself into gathering evidence. She reviewed security footage from the break room, searched for patterns in Greg's behavior, and consulted trusted colleagues who might corroborate her suspicions. Some were hesitant to speak out, fearing retaliation, but others quietly offered support, sharing stories of similar tactics used against older employees. One evening, as she sifted through files in her home office, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Curiosity outweighed caution, and she answered. "Sarah?" came a hushed voice on the other end. "This is Rachel from accounting. I heard about what's going on, and I think I might have something that could help you." Rachel explained that she'd accidentally overheard Greg discussing plans with another executive, mentioning specific dates and actions tied to Sarah's removal. Though vague, the information provided a crucial link in the chain of events Sarah was piecing together. Encouraged, Sarah redoubled her efforts, drafting a detailed report outlining her findings and submitting it directly to the board of directors. Bypassing HR and Greg altogether, she hoped this bold move would force higher-ups to investigate independently. Meanwhile, the pressure mounted. Rumors spread throughout the office, painting her as unstable or paranoid. Colleagues avoided eye contact in hallways, and invitations to meetings dwindled. Isolation became her constant companion, but she refused to let it break her spirit. Late one night, as she stared at her laptop screen, a notification popped up. An email from an anonymous sender contained a single attachment labeled breakroom_com_feed. Her pulse quickened as she clicked it open. Grainy footage played, showing Greg slipping something into her coffee cup just moments before she entered the break room. Her hands shook as she watched the damning video loop again and again. Finally, she had proof. Armed with the video and her meticulously compiled report, Sarah scheduled an emergency meeting with the board. Walking into the conference room, she felt a strange sense of calm. Win or lose, she was ready to confront the truth head-on. As she presented her case, the room fell silent. Shock rippled across faces as the video played, undeniable evidence of Greg's betrayal. When it ended, Sarah stood tall, addressing the board directly. "This isn't just about me," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "It's about integrity, justice, and ensuring that no one else suffers the same fate. If we allow this kind of behavior to continue unchecked, we're complicit in destroying everything this company stands for." The board deliberated briefly before announcing their decision. Greg would be suspended pending further investigation, and Sarah's position would remain intact. While relief washed over her, she knew the battle wasn't truly over. Rebuilding trust would take time, and scars would linger long after the dust settled. But for now, she allowed herself a small victory. Standing outside the building, the city skyline stretching endlessly before her, Sarah took a deep breath. The war wasn't won, but she had proven one thing beyond doubt: she was far from finished. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah became the center of attention, not just within her company, but in the broader industry as news of Greg's unethical behavior began to leak. Journalists sniffed out the story, and soon enough, headlines blared with phrases like "corporate sabotage unveiled" and "ageism in the workplace," a senior executive's fight for justice. The public was outraged, and Sarah found herself thrust into an unexpected role: advocate. While she hadn't sought the spotlight, she embraced it with quiet determination. She gave interviews, spoke at panels, and even collaborated with organizations dedicated to combating workplace discrimination. Her story resonated deeply with others who had faced similar challenges: older employees pushed aside, their contributions dismissed because of age rather than merit. For every person who reached out to thank her, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about saving her career anymore, it was about creating change. Within the company, things shifted dramatically. Greg's suspension turned into termination after the internal investigation confirmed his guilt beyond any doubt. Emails surfaced showing he had orchestrated not only Sarah's downfall but also targeted other senior employees over the years. His actions painted a chilling picture of systemic bias, a culture that rewarded ambition at the expense of ethics. The board acted swiftly, implementing new policies to protect against ageism and ensuring transparency in promotions and dismissals. Sarah returned to her role with a renewed mandate. No longer just a senior executive, She was now seen as a leader of integrity, someone whose resilience had exposed cracks in the system and paved the way for reform. Her team rallied around her, inspired by her courage and unwavering commitment to doing what was right. Even those who had once doubted her came forward to apologize, admitting they'd underestimated her strength. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came during a meeting with the CEO. Sitting across from him in his corner office, Sarah laid out her vision for the future, not just for herself, but for the company as a whole. "I've spent decades building this place," she said, her voice steady and confident. "And I won't let one bad actor define us. We have an opportunity here, to lead by example, to show the world that success isn't about cutting corners or stepping on people. It's about lifting each other up." The CEO nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right. And frankly, we're lucky to still have you. What do you need to make your vision a reality?" Her answer was simple yet powerful: mentorship programs, diversity initiatives, and transparent pathways for advancement regardless of age or background. By the end of the conversation, she walked away with full support to implement these changes, and a promotion to Chief Strategy Officer, a position created specifically for her. Months later, Sarah stood on stage at a prestigious industry conference, accepting an award for leadership in ethics. As applause filled the auditorium, she looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, many strangers, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. This journey had tested her in ways she never imagined, forcing her to confront fear, doubt, and betrayal. But it had also revealed her own strength, resilience, and capacity to inspire others. In her acceptance speech, she didn't dwell on the hardships she'd endured. Instead, she focused on hope. "This isn't my victory," she said, her voice carrying warmth and conviction. "It belongs to everyone who has ever been told they're too old, too young, too different to succeed. To everyone who has fought back against injustice, no matter how daunting the odds. Change doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen alone. So today, I want to thank all of you for standing with me, for believing in me, and for reminding me that our voices matter." As she stepped off the stage, colleagues and friends surrounded her, offering congratulations and hugs. Among them was Rachel, the accountant whose tip had helped uncover the truth. Sarah pulled her aside, gripping her hands tightly. "You saved me," Sarah said, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I'll never forget that." Rachel smiled shyly. "You saved yourself. I just gave you the tools." Later that evening, Sarah sat alone on the balcony of her hotel room, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. For the first time in months, she felt at peace. The scars of the past would always remain, but they no longer defined her. They were reminders of battles fought and lessons learned. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her. It was a text from her daughter, accompanied by a photo of her grandchild holding a handmade sign that read, "We're proud of Grandma." Sarah laughed softly, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, she realized something profound. This fight hadn't just been about proving herself to others. It had been about reclaiming her own belief in who she was and what she could achieve. As she tucked her phone away and leaned back in her chair, Sarah allowed herself to dream again. There were still mountains to climb, stories to tell, and lives to touch. And she knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that she was ready for whatever came next. The night stretched on, endless possibilities shimmering like stars in the sky. Sarah took a deep breath, savoring the quiet triumph of a life well lived, and one that was far from over.